Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December meeting of the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. We're having it a week early to avoid some of the holiday rush, and we'll have a special guest here towards the end, too. So would you please join me to start with a Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item is approval of the agenda.
I will move approval of the agenda.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded for agenda approval. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Public comment on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to make any comments on matters? Seeing none, we'll move forward to approval of the November 15th minutes.
I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Review of monthly year-to-date revenue.
Good morning, members of the board. This report summarizes revenue and expenses for the month of October. Starting with Fund 870, the beginning balance was $7.6 million. The SBE property invoices went out this month, so we accrued approximately $588,000 in revenue. Expenses were $7,000, and the ending cash position for Fund 870 was $8.2 million. And with Fund 871, the starting balance was negative $15.7 million. We received $1 million from the in lieu of fee fund from the Bridgeway Drain Project that was approved last month's board meeting. The majority of expenses this month went toward the Deepwater Ship Channel East project for $529,000 and the Southport Levee project for $253,000. Grand total for all expenditures was $822,000. Ending cash position for 871 was negative $15.5 million. Looking at the year-to-date position, along with $35 million advanced fee state funding, the combined cash position was $27.9 million, and that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions,
No.
folks?
Nope.
I think I've asked this before. When does the allocation of the state funds end up in 871?
We're working on 4 months right now. We had a true-up memo that we had to work through as a group between LWA, DWR, and WSAFCA. We finished that last week. And so the SOCs for a revised June, July, August, September, and then October, we're working on those right now. So we'll be seeing payment letters, I'm hoping before the holiday closes, and then we'll see money shift from 257 into 871 and start to erode some of that negative balance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Consent agenda. One item, item 5.
I'll move consent.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to move the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Regular agenda. Item 6. Consideration of adjustments for revenue and expenditure for WSAFCA and a budget review. Roberta, thank you. Welcome.
There, I'm on. Okay. Good morning. It's great to see you. I have a PowerPoint presentation primarily for the public and just to focus on a couple of things that I wanted to go over with you guys today. I didn't plan on going over a lot of the details in the report because you have already seen those, but I'm happy to ask questions on them. I think the slideshow, if I can figure out how to do this. There we go. We've got a little bit of an agenda. So the focus of my presentation is really going to be on the top 3 bullets here, looking at the general support allocation versus the ICAP. I know that's a question that has come up a lot historically. And then looking at Fund 652, which is the city's flood support services fund, there's We're going to look at how it ended 17-18 when we did our reconciliation, kind of what is included in that, but then also go back and do a little bit of a historical reconciliation. I know that was also requested, so hopefully that will help answer some questions. And then briefly, I've got Fund 870 and 871, kind of showing where we ended 17-18 and if there are any adjustments requested for 18-19, which there are in Fund 870. And then the last slide is just to explain our recommended action, the resolution that we're asking you to adopt. Okay, so first, to get into the general support allocation and the indirect cost allocation plan, there's 3 different ways that we do this for WSAFCA. For most external agencies that we don't run the books for, we do it a little bit differently. It's just the first 2 bullets. But essentially, I know there's been some discussion about what's the difference between the general support allocation and the indirect cost allocation plan and making sure that we're not duplicating in those. And I will tell you, they are duplicated, but they are intended to be. The way the general support allocation works is we've got, within the city, one fund, 104, for our support services, our services that are administration in nature, facility maintenance, insurance, finance, HR, city manager. Those things are then allocated out to all city funds, including Fund 652, because that's a city fund, just to make sure that it's getting its portion of the overhead allocation for the city. We'll go through the details of what's included in that and how that's calculated in a minute. And then once that is allocated out to city funds, for any employees who are working on projects or things for external agencies, billable to external agencies, this is the number 2. They charge their time to those projects through the time card system. And on a monthly basis, we go through and take all of their time charged to other agencies, add the ICAP rate, which is adjusted downward a little bit from the general support allocation because we're limited in what we can charge to like federal grant funds. And so that is adjusted slightly. We charge the ICAP rate to recuperate some of that administrative overhead cost for the time that is actually spent working on projects for external agencies. For WSAFCA, this is a little bit different because we also manage Fund 870. So rather than send you a bill for that time, we just transfer the funds, but we've got our backup showing how that was calculated. And then WSAFCA is also different, again, because Fund 652 is entirely dedicated towards support provided for WSAFCA. At the end of the year, we do a reconciliation, or we're supposed to do a reconciliation just to true that Fund 652 up and make sure at the end of the year the balance is 0. So basically, we've received revenues for all of the expenses that we've incurred. And so I think one of the issues is over the last couple of years, that wasn't necessarily done to true that up at the end of the year, but we did do that in 17-18, and I'll show you that reconciliation here shortly. This slide just shows kind of a pictorial representation, and the color coding means something. So the first part of this is what I just talked about, the city indirect costs in Fund 104. Those are green. We allocate those out to our city funds. You'll see in the reports that were provided as attachments to your agenda report that I've color coded those things just to make it easier to flow through the documents. The second part I've colored orange. That's where we bill for time and administration that is allocable to projects. And then number 3 is with WSAFCA only. We do a true up, a reconciliation at the end of the year just to make sure that we are closing out our Fund 652 with a 0 balance. So to get into each of these steps a little bit more detailed, the first part, the general support allocation, I've provided a slide and I also provided an attachment for you showing all of the different pieces that make up that charge. So for WSAFCA, it's liability insurance. There is no property insurance that is applied. That is typically a direct, if there's property insurance, like on a wastewater treatment plant or something, we would charge that directly to the appropriate fund. City Hall maintenance, and that is based on office space square footage. And so the way that is allocated to WSAFCA is that it's allocated to CDD, the Community Development Department, based on their office space usage. And then that's allocated out to each of their cost centers based on the number of employees in the cost centers. The general service, that's basically the city manager, IT, HR, finance, any of the work that we do for you all. And so that is allocated based on the number of employees. Revenue collection, there is no allocation. That's our counter folks, and they take monies, tax revenues, utility billing, and things like that. So those costs are allocated to those funds. Facility maintenance is allocated similarly to the city hall maintenance. It depends on the percentage of use, and so CDD, for example, had about 15.6% of total use for facility maintenance. In 17-18, they were allocated that percentage, and then that was allocated out to all of the CDD cost centers, including 652, based on the number of employees. So I show in the first red square kind of how things are allocated. Prior to that, I show the actual cost for 17-18, and then I'm showing the actual allocation to Fund 652. This is all for 17-18, and so that total came up to $227,054. That is something just to let you know that we're working on this year. We've had the same allocation factors for a number of years, and I'm hiring a consultant to come in and look, update our cost allocation plan, make sure that we're doing it very simply, just based on the number of employees. It's certainly okay, but I think there might be better ways to do it, looking at portion, maybe number of employees, a portion maybe on the budget or the types of transactions we do, and so we have a consultant that'll be coming in to look at those and provide an update for that. Okay, so the second piece is we talked about employees who work on projects billable to other agencies. So this just shows for 17-18 Fund 652 revenues for time that for employees that are typically charged to Fund 652 who then did work for other projects, and then the money that was transferred in both from WSAFCA and from city project sources, and the ICAP reimbursement to go with that. So that's the first two pieces of the cost allocation.
Can I ask a question right there?
Yeah.
If you go back to it, just so work order billings with WSAFCA projects, how is that different than ICAP reimbursements?
So the WSAFCA project work order billings, that is only the staff time. So that is the labor and benefits for the time that's charged. Then we apply a percentage for the ICAP based on our approved ICAP plan, and that piece is the ICAP reimbursement. So in total, for both staff time and the administration reimbursement, the total was $952,331. And so we break that out between, there's part of that ICAP reimbursement comes from the WSAFCA fund. Part of that comes from the other funds based on the time that was charged to other city projects.
So in reality, the amount that's going from account 871 to 652 is both of those together, right?
It's going to be the 438 and a large
506.
portion of the 506.
Okay.
But part of that 506 is also ICAP on the other
City project,
projects.
okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And I might show that better on a different slide. I tried to go through a few different ways just to make sure that it made sense
Okay.
for me too. Okay, and so then the third part at the end of the year, for City Flood Support Services Fund 652, all costs are eventually charged to WSAFCA. So we do a reconciliation. This is one vision of it. I'm going to show you another vision here in a moment. But at the end of the year, we look at any costs in Fund 652 that were not recuperated through charging to projects, and then we go ahead and charge WSAFCA. And in some cases, maybe we've recuperated too much, in which case we would return funds to WSAFCA, but we'll do this reconciliation every year because the goal at the end of the year is Fund 652 will end with a zero balance, enough revenues to cover expenditures. So for 17-18, one thing that I did detail in your reports and in the agenda report is the prior year true up, that $118,615. And so we did earlier in the year realize that we had charged WSAFCA Fund 870 too much by about $118,000, and so we reversed that. We basically sent money back to Fund 870. And then at the end of the year, we charged WSAFCA $28,000 to true up Fund 652 for the year. So I'm actually going to show that in a little bit more detail here. I don't like to put a lot of numbers and things on slides. It's hard to follow, but I kind of had to do it. So this just shows our budget for 17-18, the final unaudited numbers, and any difference to the budget. So we did budget for work order billings for WSAFCA projects, a little over $1 million. We got about $865,000. Total revenues that came in were $953,000, and that comes from time charged to city projects, time charged to WSAFCA projects, and that gives you the total you were looking for a minute ago on the previous slide. And then the other revenues are basically investment earnings on cash balance. That will typically be zero because if we're not holding cash in this fund, there's nothing to earn money on. But because we had held cash in the fund for the last couple of years, there's some interest earnings there. And then the expenditures, we've got our total personnel costs, our supplies and services, the transfer out to the city for general support administration, and then the transfer out to WSAFCA, that $118,000 that we were correcting for a prior year. At the end of the year, does this have a light on it? Oh, wow, I'm going to go different places. Okay, so I'll try and direct you with my, I'm trying. Okay, one more. Okay, so down in the red square on the bottom is really where you need to focus. We look at the revenues, we look at the expenditures. There was a net surplus or deficit for the year. It was basically a deficit of $368,000, but we had $339,984 sitting in that fund just because we hadn't trued it up to zero at the last couple of years. So we applied that balance to the net surplus or deficit, and we ended with a negative fund balance of $28,206. So that is the amount that was charged to WSAFCA Fund 870. Once that's charged, our ending fund balance is zero. Oh, I probably just hit that twice. Okay, and so this just shows after we do that reconciliation what you see, and this ties with the reports that were attached to your agenda report. Before I move on, because I know there's a lot packed in there, are there any questions on that?
None right now. Okay. Received this information on Saturday, and briefly was able to look at it with other things to do. So at some point I may have some additional questions, but not right now.
We should get you this presentation too if you don't already have it, because I've tried to sort of focus on some things that might be easier for your review as well. Email me, call me. I'm happy to explain.
Very good.
If you have any questions. Okay, this slide, this is information that was presented to you, I think, during original adoption of the budget, but we did update it for the 17-18 ICAP rate. So this is a detail of the 6.87 positions that are charged to 652 for 17-18. You'll recall during the midterm budget back in June, we brought to you an item that actually increased that to 7, but actually had a net decrease in costs to WSAFCA just for some position changes that we were making. And so when I come back again, we look at 18-19, I'll update that for the 7 positions so you can see those details. Okay, this thing is really sensitive. And so now that we looked at 17-18, this is the historical reconciliation of Fund 652. And I show this in 2 different ways too, but what it really shows is that for 15-16, the contributions from WSAFCA were just as budgeted. We didn't do a reconciliation. And at the end of the year, there was an ending fund balance of $129,000. Had we been doing our reconciliations the way we should have, that 390, 749 would have been reduced by the 129,025, and then your ending balance would have been 0. But because we have this in a separate fund, the fund balance carries over and remains in this fund every year, and so it's protected, correct, and it stays in there so that we could make the adjustment later. So the same thing for 16-17. We transferred the budgeted amount of contributions from WSAFCA, $367,405. We did not do a true up at the end of the year. We ended with an additional $211,000 in net surplus, which added to that $129,000 to leave us a balance of $339,985. So we did the reconciliation in 17-18. You'll see that the contributions from WSAFCA were reduced to $28,000. And then at the end of the year, we utilized that net surplus or deficit to reduce our charges to WSAFCA, and we end with a 0 fund balance. So the way 17-18 is, with the exception of having a beginning balance, that's what you should see every year going forward. God, I just think about it and this changes. So this shows a different way of looking at this, and I don't know if this is more confusing or not, but this really helped me. One of the reasons I'm only giving 3 years on the historical reconciliation is because it's much easier to do that when everything is contained in its own fund. So in 2015-16, we moved this function from Public Works to CDD. We created its own fund, and so that was much easier for me to do. I'm hoping that this shows that we've reconciled and we've kind of got this working in a good way going forward. But if there is desire to see additional history, I can do it. It's just going to take a little bit more time to pull those pieces together. So certainly let me know. But the way I pulled this together was just to bring in basically what the reconciliation looks like. We look at our revenues that are revenues from other sources, not WSAFCA. and our expenses for that fund, which is basically the personnel and then some supplies and services, and our general support allocation. So our total, or our net revenue or expenses show in that first total line for 15-16 were negative $877,000, $877,978. And then we add to that the work order billing. So the revenues that have come in to Fund 652 from WSAFCA and other funds based on the work done on projects. That was $616,000. The costs that were not recovered then through the work order billing is $261,724. That amount should be exactly the same as the contribution from WSAFCA. Okay, and that's how we end up doing that. Because it wasn't in those prior years, we ended up with a net surplus or deficit. Again, that should have been a credit to WSAFCA. But when I total all 3 years, we end up with those two numbers being exactly the same and our ending fund balance being zero. So that is how we should see it going forward on an annual basis. And I'm going to look to you all because we've gone through this a lot. Is there anything else that you think we would want to state? Okay. So moving on, here's the fun part. 870, I did talk in the report a little bit about some of the changes. You'll see a couple of reimbursements from the city in 17-18. That 118 that we talked about was an amount for prior years. General support allocation that was overcharged. The $37,953 was a reimbursement for prior year lobbying expenses. And then, of course, there was a reimbursement from Department of Water Resources for costs going back to 2014. On the expenditure side, you'll see things come in a little bit differently than budget, but overall we did pretty well. We basically came in double our operating surplus than what we expected, and a big part of that is attributable to the reduced contributions to the city from WSAFCA, just based on that reconciliation and the fact that we had fund balance there. And then on the debt service side, we it looks like about $700,000 less in debt service payments. Still looking at exactly why that happened, but I think there are two other funds where we track the debt service payments for the 2011 and 2015 bonds. Those funds had some balance that we were able to use, and so we went ahead and used that towards those debt service payments, especially given the cash flow while we were waiting for the big advance from the state. So, but what you will see in 18-19 is I actually had to update those numbers for our debt service schedule, and we're asking to add about $356,000 to the budget to go ahead and be able to cover those. Some other minor adjustments to the budget. We had some contributions budgeted in revenues, $4,848. Oh, look at that. We actually have some actuals this year. Isn't that funny? So I was actually proposing to remove those because I didn't see that there was any actual transactions there, but I will look into those. And then on the expense side, it looked like we didn't have quite enough budgeted in the right places to cover our First Northern Bank line of credit expenses. We're adding about $30,000 for the new lobbyist contract that you approved in a previous meeting, and then moving some things around within professional services to be able to cover. We have reduced audit costs with our new auditor firm this year. The property tax administration appears like it's been charged but hasn't necessarily been called out in a budget previously, and that's just the cost to have the county administer the assessments and collect all of that and get us the revenues. And then under other, it looks like there were just some additional costs for banking fees that hadn't necessarily been accounted for in that budget. So some minor adjustments. The total overall is about $415,000, primarily attributed to the debt service payments. So, and if you guys have any questions on any of those specifically, I'm happy to answer those. Okay. Fund 871, we've also provided this. It looks like each time we've provided a budget update, this just gives the active projects that are ongoing. This reconciliation is really a lifetime reconciliation, so the total budget for the projects, expenditures so far through June 30th, 2018, and then the remaining balance. And so these are projects that are being worked on this year with their balances. There are no adjustments that are proposed here as of yet. I didn't even touch it. Okay. I'm fascinated by this thing. I'm sorry. So at the end of the day, the requested action is to approve Resolution 18-1202, adopting some budget adjustments for Funds 870 for 2018-19. Again, the total request is $415,680. It might have been a little bit hard to tell on your resolution just because a part of that was a reduction in a revenue budget. The total expenses that we're asking to increase are about $410,000, and primarily for that lobbying contract and our debt service payment. So that's the end of my presentation.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Well, before I entertain a motion for the resolution, I have one, and maybe it's more for Mark, and it has to do with, you mentioned the line of credit and those costs or something. What are the mechanics of the accounting of that line of credit? Is that in account 870, and when it's drawn on, it's transferred to 871, or how does that happen?
I believe the holding costs are accruing in 870, but I have to go back and look on it. But I thought it was 870.
It is
Because we
870.
really don't have any balance sheets here to see, kind of where those obligations and whatnot are, but if it...
That's a great question,
Yeah.
actually. And I think we did draw on that line of credit for
Right.
the first time this year. And so we did create a fund in 1819 for that cash balance when we did have that in place. The costs for holding the line of credit are charged to 870.
Okay.
But through the end of last year, we didn't actually have any cash on hand. We were just paying for the opportunity to use that cash should we need it. So in 1819, and I can do this when I give another update for the current year, include that fund in it, because for a period of time, we were holding some cash that we had drawn down. We have since paid that back. And so now we're just continuing to pay for the opportunity to utilize that money should we need to.
In the reporting, we didn't carry the borrowed money in 871. We carried it on the balance sheet. So generally, the reports you get are revenue and expense reports.
Right.
So when we drew on the line of credit to keep our balance in the black, it was a balance sheet entry. So you wouldn't necessarily have seen it, but we can bring back a report. You can see the balance sheet if you'd like.
Okay, because it's hard to keep track of whether it's been drawn on,
Yeah.
or whether it's been cleared, or what. We don't...
Yeah, I
necessarily
visited
know
for
that.
like 2 or 3 weeks until
Yeah,
we got
yeah.
the next advance payment.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, Roberta.
Thanks, Roberta.
With that, any discussion on, or I'll entertain a motion on the resolution, but is there any discussion on it?
I'll move the recommended action.
And I will second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve Resolution 18-12-01. All those in favor?
And also, and also approve the final unaudited budget, et cetera. I
Okay.
think it's 2 approvals, approval and adoption.
Okay, the motion as
Okay, thanks.
amended.
And
So-
I'll second the amended.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Roberta, thank you. Southport project update, Mr. Ken. Nice pictures this time. Yeah.
Good morning, Chair Ramos, members of the board. I'll provide you the final update for 2018 on the Southport project.
I think the mic is off.
Is it off?
Yeah.
There we go. How about
Oh,
now?
perfect, thanks.
All right. New picture I updated on here is essentially kind of showing the south offset area. We got some greenery popping through some of our jute netting and whatnot. I'll have some additional photos, but things are starting to look real good out there as far as some of the rains kind of going through the project. Some flows coming through there, but the river's relatively low at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves over these next couple months as reservoir levels continue to discharge and go from there. Over the last month, we closed out a lot of our earthwork activities, primarily the seepage berm and segments D&E. So at this point, all major earthwork has been completed. We've got some minor grading that I mentioned right there, finished grading on segments E and F on that seepage berm, but for the most part, all the dirt we're going to move for this year has been moved. We've got some offset area seeding and stabilization. That's the remnant levee offset area as well as the setback levee. That's all been completed. We're in the process of post and cable and gate installation. Gate installation's been moving along fairly well, coordinating with different folks to be able to get locks on there, make sure we secure the site. And then as we continue to complete our post and cable, we'll continue to kind of tidy up the site and create that barrier, if you will, between where the project limits are and the adjoining properties. We're also doing some work on the AB patrol roads. For the most part, we're substantially complete as far as placing the material, but there's a few areas where we're placing at the cul-de-sacs and whatnot connections so that we can maintain access for our operation and maintenance folks over the winter to be able to kind of watch the levee and do whatever maintenance activities they need to moving forward, as well as AECOM, the contractor, performing erosion sediment control maintenance, looking at the BMPs and making sure that things are going along well for the vegetation, as well as maintaining the levee itself. We've got some finished rock placement that's happening this week in segments C and G. Those are our 2 erosion sites. That'll be completed this Friday, so we'll be complete with that. We're also doing some vegetation work in those particular areas, siltation trenches, willows plantings, pole planting, things of that nature. That'll be ongoing for the rest of this month, and they'll be working on that. We've got ongoing survey work, so as we've completed items, getting the surveys for those, incorporating them into the final project surveys, making sure we're hitting elevations, and all the material needs to be where it needs to be. We're also in the process of reviewing and completing miscellaneous work items, what we refer to as our punch list, really the final items that they're going through. We've had a walkthrough in the south that was completed a few weeks back. We've got an upcoming one in the north that we'll complete. We'll have to go ahead and do a walkthrough ourselves, as well as with our project partners, Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Water Resources, Reclamation District staff, to make sure that we get everything that's on the plans and any additional items they see as part of that punch list walkthrough. So, as we go through, I'll take you from the south to north, just like in previous. You'll see a gate installed right there at the south end. This is our segment A. Work for this area has been primarily done. We've had to do some maintenance on the erosion and sediment control, not only in this area, but all throughout. So additional straw, things of that nature that's needed in order to go ahead and take care of some of the sloughing off that's happened due to rains. But that's been completed, and we'll continue to monitor that moving forward. So, as we move to the north, we've got segment B2. That's our southernmost inlet outlet, the southwest inlet outlet is what we refer to. All stabilization of that's been completed. You'll see the jute netting and the coir fabric. That's the difference in the 2 different colors that you see out there. And we've got rock slope protection placed both at the nose of the inlet outlet, as well as the interaction with the river. Can't see it too well now because it's underwater, but we've got quite a bit of rock placed out there as well. You also see the setback levee and one of our borrow restoration sites off on the left-hand side, and that work for the year has been completed. Traveling to the north, there's our southeast breach. You can see the river level coming up and really inundating our low flow channel going throughout there. So you can kind of, a little bit difficult to see when you're actually out there in the field without the water in it. But now that we got some flow going through there, you can really see where we're established, that low flow channel relative to the rest of it. And there's one of our barges and cranes that's been placed in the rock. Like I mentioned, they'll be done later on this week. And also off to the left, you can see some of the borrow restore areas. I'll mention that a little bit later on. Here's a picture looking south at Davis Road, actually just above the Sherwood Marina. Our erosion repair site. You can kind of see off there towards the middle of the picture, a little to the left, some rock placement, some of our in-stream woody material. Like I said, for the most part, that work is being completed this week with some of the vegetation, primarily in that area, really coming to an end. So we'll be monitoring that and maintaining that, and just kind of an overall picture of what the offset area, setback levee, and remnant levee kind of look like. And this is towards the north end of our south offset area. Here we have a picture of the Sherwood, new Sherwood Marina entrance. We got 2 of these, one here and one at the Yacht Club. Those areas have been striped, signed. We're doing some minor cleanup work in and around there, reestablishing drainage, and doing whatever remedies we need to for some of the erosion we've ran into. But that's a shot there along with Peace Lake in the background. Village Parkway, with some of the trucking we've had to do, has had to be maintained with streepers and whatnot. So we'll continue to kind of monitor that and coordinate with city folks and make sure that that gets reestablished, and make sure they're buttoning things up on that end. Here's a shot of segment E, where we just finished the last of the seepage berm. That's why you'll see some of the bare dirt in that area. Since then, it's been covered with straw and tack. So that area has been stabilized for the time being, but we'll have to do permanent stabilization once we can get in there and do that with some drill seeding and hydro seeding. Traveling northward, here's our northernmost inlet outlet, another shot of our setback levee offset area. And like I said, we kind of see the water flowing through the low flow channel right there. We've done some additional stabilization work this week. Our erosion repair site is just north of this, so we'll see that in the follow-up picture. But things are starting to look good here, and this is the northern end of our project. You can kind of see where our top of levee ties into the core project that was done prior to our project being implemented. and we're doing some cleanup work, and we'll have a punch list walkthrough later on this month to make sure we get some of those areas buttoned up and taken care of. But that's the project from north to south to north. I did want to bring this up to folks. We've had some folks talking to us about seeing some of the erosion out there on the project. For the most part, things that we've been seeing on social media and some of the interactions have been fairly minor. Before vegetation establishes, and with some of these rains that came in, we had some minor erosion that's been since addressed. But really what's going to wind up causing issues, and it has caused issues in the past, is damage due to off-road vehicles and all-terrain vehicles. Here's a couple pictures of what we dealt with that first weekend. Some folks decided to go out there and take care of, kind of use our offset area. So something we're just going to have to continue to coordinate with city folks on and kind of get the word out there. We've done some preliminary outreach with some of those folks, and I know it's been mentioned in the city meeting as well, but we'll continue to go ahead and kind of wrap our project up with the project fencing to hopefully limit some of this, but there's going to be areas and folks are going to find a way to get through some of this stuff. So we're going to have to be diligent in our duties and kind of reviewing this over the next year to see where some of those weaknesses might be and see what kind of remedies we need to do that, but really just also getting the community involved and making sure that folks are aware, hey, we spent a lot of money getting these improvements up here. We all want them to stay for the long term, so any help that they can with eyes out there, calling PD, enforcement, things of that nature would really help us do our job. We've got a limited amount of funds to do this and limited staff. When we have to go ahead and address items like this, it just takes away from resources that could be used doing other things throughout. So we'll continue to monitor this. Like I said, repairs will be made as we go through the project, but long term, this is an issue we've had in other parts of the levee throughout. So you just want to make sure that we're diligent and continue to outreach with our city partners as well as DWR.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
About how serious is that kind of, I brought that up at the council meeting. I had the fortune to see you right before council last week, and I'm really concerned about it. How significant is that to structurally to the levee if that off-roading were to continue?
Well, I don't know if Kendrick, if you want to speak to this more since you've had.
I'm really concerned about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously erosion's a problem. And it's going to be difficult to get vegetation to grow on areas that are continually driven on, and you get a heavy rain, you'll have rills. If you have high water and you have those rills, you potentially get more erosion. So, in and of itself, if there's no major events, it's not going to cause any massive problems, but it's a maintenance problem. It gets written up every year. It'll be written up as a deficiency that needs to be addressed. We've got spots on the Sac Bank project, that little setback project that the Corps did, that vegetation has never grown because vehicles continuously go up and down. So repairing them, it'll happen if they keep doing it. It'll rut, it's clay, it'll kind of stay there. It makes it more difficult to deal with that spot. And so it's a problem, but it's not going to, unless we have a really significant event, it's not going to cause anything catastrophic. As long as you stay on top of it, but we really don't want it happening. It just becomes you end up chasing, you end up spending all your money just trying to fix stuff that you shouldn't have to fix, and it's just a drain on resources more than anything.
Yeah, and pulls eyes away from, what we could be looking at on other areas of the project. And of course, land side isn't exposed to water, so, like I said, it's more of a resource and time constraint. But if we got more of this stuff on the water side, there's also the potential for additional erosion there, and that could cause additional sloughing and emergency repairs, things of that nature. And anytime you run into an emergency repair, it costs you a fortune. So, like I said, with the resources we have, we'd like to expend them on what we feel we need to do, and this is just a drain on that. So,
well, I guess we'll continue getting the word out, and hopefully people will call when they see that. As you mentioned, we did get concerned folks about when they saw some erosion because it's so pristine, and you and I chatted. It'll happen and it can get repaired because it's the first rain on the new levee. But this kind of thing, just getting the word out and keeping on it and making sure folks that have these vehicles know what they're they're actually damaging something of value to the city and to the residents.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we've got the post and cable fencing, the gates going up, but
Great.
well, like I said, we'll keep an eye on where some of those weaknesses may be, because there's a few areas they could drive around. Just impractical to put fencing in some of those areas, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, the project looks, it looks really wonderful.
No, there's a
It's
lot of work we
actually-
needed to do this year, and it was a heavy lift, but we got there.
Well, I'll add to the discussion that, you know, the project's done, and like you said, it looks good, and people are going to be curious, and they're going to be out there. And long-term, you know, the city's interests and the community as a whole of having, you know, recreational opportunities and whatever, you know, we can add. It's flood protection facility first, but, you know, the other opportunities, I think we need to start now working towards letting people know what's allowed and what's not allowed, where access can happen, and, you know, what their responsibilities are. And I think we can work with the city, the reclamation district, to let that be known, and hopefully, you know, people will respect that, and you know, it'll be a facility everyone can see and use over time. So,
Thank you. Yeah, and there is the one item that we do have for the 2019 construction season that we'll have to take care of, and that's borrow site restoration. Some of our areas are continue to be low, so we're going to do an analysis on where that material is, figure out what the deficit is on that, and then we'll restore that. But that has nothing to do with the flood protection facilities. Those are all in place, but you'll see us doing some more work out there, and that'll be primarily what that's for.
when does the additional habitat plantings and those type of things, is that going to happen in 2019 or?
We're hoping to start it next year, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Any more questions? All right.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ken. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good job. On to WSAFCA project updates. Greg.
Thank you, Chair Ramos, members of the board. With regards to Southport project, the only other item that I'd like to point out that's in your progress report is that staff is working on sending in our invoicing for reimbursement under that site cleanup account program relative to the Time Oil site. So we're starting that process now and hope to receive reimbursement soon. Before I talk about the federal project, I just wanted to update the board on the meeting that took place on December 6th that was coordinated by the Regional Flood Management Planning Team. It was the YOLO Bypass Cash Loop Partnership meeting. 15 member agencies represented there from DWR, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, NIMS, and the like, Army Corps of Engineers. Main purpose of the meeting was to get the group back together, remind them of their original mission that we had talked about a couple years ago, and then to introduce and remind them of our project implementation roadmap in the Yellow Bypass, outline resources needed from each of the agencies, and then to ask for their support moving forward over the next 12 months. The broader vision of that partnership is to provide a coordinated approach to project implementation. As you're probably aware, there's numerous efforts that kind of the bypass is kind of ground zero from biological opinions and other private and state-led projects. So this coordinated effort to make sure that there aren't unintended consequences or impacts to other folks, that there is a path forward where, to use the phrase, all boats can rise is what the ultimate vision and goal is. So more to come on that through the coming year. Federal project. I know the board is aware that we received our first installment of PED funds, the $400,000, not quite the $4 million we were looking for, but the door is now open. The district can now participate in moving the federal project forward through design, and that will, the first order of business, if you will, is execution of a design agreement. It'll be a three-party agreement with the state, WSAFCA, and the Corps. The board may recall that you took action on a draft design agreement a couple of months back. There will be some minor amendments to that, at least to quantify the current dollar amount. and that will be reviewed by WSAFCA Legal. If there are no substantive changes, then I believe the board has already given authorization for execution of that. So I don't anticipate needing to bring that back to the board for a formal action, but we will keep the board updated on as that moves forward. Right now, we're targeting full execution in February, and that is due to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board being presented with the item in January for information, and then action in February to execute. In parallel with that, we'll work with the district to develop the project management plan that outlines the work that they will do under the design agreement over the course of the next year. And with the team, the broader team with the Corps and the state, we've conceptually outlined that WSAFCA and the state will lead the design effort to at least the 65% design milestone. Our goal would be to get that completed by about this time next year. And as we start approaching that 65% design milestone, we will be having conversations with the Corps about perhaps continuing to move that forward to design completion. So we can turn that over to the Corps for execution of a PPA, assuming we get the funding for New Start construction, and then for them being able to award a contract. But to the extent that we can get this thing buttoned up and packaged for them to be able to award a contract, that's what we want to do. Also in parallel with that, and in order to be eligible and compete well for New Start construction funding, we'll be working with the Corps on improving our BCR. Currently it sits at 2.2, not the ideal 2.5 that we would like to have to qualify for New Start construction funding. And this will likely be a combination of looking at reduction in the overall program cost through some investigations, as well as a refinement of the project schedule to reduce some of those interest costs. That combination of bringing it down so we can get to a 2.5 or better.
Greg, how long will that updated process take to where we could actually see, you know, a reduction? Is it hard to tell?
If we, schedule can be adjusted without having to do any investigative work. If I think the way the numbers roll out right now, if our current construction schedule is 11 years, if we can reduce that down to 7, I think it's 7 or 8 years we get into the 2.5, 2.6 realm.
Okay.
We may not be able to solely rely on just a schedule reduction. What has changed in the last year that has allowed us to just, not arbitrarily, but to think that we can shave 4 years off of the last time this project was updated. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that we can solely rely on that. I think we would looking at somewhere on the order of $150 million if we of project scope reduction to get to 2.5.
Okay.
So some combination of schedule and cost reduction will get us there. Our goal is to have that work completed and to the Corps for evaluation and for them to do the economic update before this time next year. We want to be in a position to have a certified BCR at the time that funding requests are being made. We'll also be looking at adjusting the project description. We've talked about life safety, the uniqueness of our system, the way the water behaves in the wintertime, primarily is when we see flooding. That's cold water. There's a significant risk to life safety should we be in a flooding situation. And then I think how we might update that moving forward is now that we're the remaining piece of this system that has yet to receive funding for construction, if we can't keep pace with these other projects, as you guys are aware, then we're looking at increased risk to West Sacramento over time. So we want to make sure that we bring that to become part of the conversation as well.
And Greg, you mentioned we'd like to have it at 2.5, but isn't it, we need to have it at 2.5 or higher? It's really more of a necessity to move forward?
It's not a necessity. It's certainly, it's preferred. There are projects every year that are authorized for one reason or another. Life safety sometimes is a factor with a BCR less than 2. So there, and that's something that we're also looking at with this last project authorization. There was only one new start, I think, from the last work plan for a flood project. Their BCR at their chief's report was very similar to ours. I think ours was 3.2 around the chief report time. I think theirs was 3.4, and that's like at a 3% or a little over 3% discount rate or interest rate. And I'd be willing to bet that their BCR at 7% is less than 2.5. I'd like to know what it is and to find out what other considerations were given and were made to authorize that project for New Start. So, we'd like to be there and not have to rely on other arguments.
One less roadblock.
Right.
Yeah. And that's pretty much of my updates, and I think it's a good time now to segue into the next item on the agenda, which is to assist us in getting to where we need to be. I'd like to introduce Mike Strawn with our new additional lobbyist for WSAFCA.
Mike, welcome.
Now hit the button on the base of the microphone. There it is.
Get a green light? Yep.
Don't want to be near that. Okay. With all due respect to the previous presenters, Greg, Ken, and Roberta, who I think is left, the one thing that I can say with absolute confidence about my presentation is that it's going to be slower. I'm also going to venture that none of you grew up in Mississippi, but that's okay. We can work with that. Chair Ramos, board members, staff members, thank you. My name is Mike Strawn. I'm a Washington-based consultant specializing in water resources programs of the Corps of Engineers. I'm happy to be on board, not quite 2 weeks now, and thank you for the vote of confidence that the WSAFCA has shown me. Look forward to working with the board members, with the congressional delegation, with the Corps of Engineers, with Holland and Knight, your general purpose Washington-based representatives. There's no way, and it's not intended that I will replace their efforts, but I will complement them, supplement them from a specialist point of view, and look forward to working cooperatively with them and to develop a consistent message. And Greg is already taking measures to make sure that happens. So look forward to working with you. I've been with the Corps of Engineers in the past. In fact, and I've mentioned this to City Council member, board member Sandine prior to this meeting, in one form or another, or from one context or another, I've been associated with the water resources programs of the Corps of Engineers for over 47 years. About half of that was actually working for the agency. I started out in a district office, not unlike the Sacramento district across the river. Spent half of my core career there, learning how to do things from a field perspective. I finished my Corps of Engineers career in headquarters in Washington, working on legislative issues and budget and appropriations matters. I finished out my federal career working on Capitol Hill for one of the committees of the House of Representatives, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. That's the committee I'm sure you know that does water resources authorization bills, or WRDAs as they're more commonly known, and provides oversight on the core programs. I was the water resources staff director there, and then ultimately the staff director for the deputy staff director, for the full committee. And then for the last, since retiring and from public service in 2002, I've been pleased to work with public sector entities such as WSAFCA, primarily, almost solely on Corps of Engineers related matters, helping them understand, decipher, navigate the Corps of Engineers processes, legislative processes, working with congressional delegations and the agencies generally. I'm happy to be on board, and in true Washington fashion, I'll be happy to evade any of your questions. Thank you.
Any questions at all? Well,
No questions.
we're happy to have you aboard. I think it's going to be a major addition to our efforts on the federal project, and we look forward to getting to know you a little better and working together with the city to accomplish our goal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appropriations and New Start.
Thank you.
And I have to say, before you introduced yourself, I thought this is really cool. We hired Trent Lott to help us out in D.C.
Trent was my senator for a while, and the one thing that I'll commit to you in addition to working hard to achieve funding for the project is I'll try to talk faster from now on. Thank you.
Whatever works.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else, Greg?
No, I'd just like to point out, as is listed on the agenda, so after we adjourn, we have some one-by-one meetings that will take place in room 238 here, and then at 11 o'clock we'll reconvene. For those that want to attend, we'll reconvene by the back door downstairs for a tour of the Southport project.
Okay. Thank you. And public is invited if necessary, if they're interested.
That's
Okay.
correct.
All right. Next item, director's comments. Do we have any at this time?
Yeah, no, thank
Neither do I. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.